Welcome to the deep dive. So today we're going to tackle something that honestly it plays out almost everywhere, especially when things get tense.
Definitely.
We're diving straight into the drama triangle. Heard of it? Victim, rescuer, persecutor.
Right, the Karpman model. It's a classic.
Exactly, that unconscious cycle.
Yeah.
And kind of underpinning that, we'll dig into the fate motive, this idea that, well, maybe suffering or bad patterns are just inevitable for us, part of the deal.
Yeah, and it's fascinating how they often connect, right? That feeling of this is just how it is for me can really lock you into those drama roles without you even seeing it sometimes.
Totally. And that's really the mission here for this deep dive. We're not just, defining terms.
Right.
The goal is to pull out practical, actionable ways to step out of these things. We've looked at psychology, spirituality, coaching, even how it plays out in organizations.
Yeah, aiming for real tools people can use, not just theory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because let's be real, who hasn't felt trapped sometimes? Like feeling helpless or maybe feeling you have to fix things for someone.
Pointing the finger when stuff goes wrong.
It's super universal. Okay, so let's really unpack this drama triangle. 3 main roles we fall into in conflict. First up, the victim. What's the core there?
The victim fundamentally feels powerless. The tagline is kind of poor me.
Right.
They tend to feel like they can't change things. They blame others, blame circumstances, really avoid taking responsibility. And often they're sort of looking for that savior figure.
That rescuer.
Exactly. So they might get sympathy, sure, but they stay kind of stuck, powerless.
Okay. And then, the rescuer, what's their approach?
The rescuer is all, let me help you. They often feel like really guilty if they don't jump in and try to save the victim.
Okay.
But here's the catch. They often ignore their own needs doing it. And maybe unintentionally, they end up reinforcing the victim's dependency because they're always solving the problems for them.
Which, like you said, keeps the whole thing spinning. Okay, third point. The persecutor. What's their deal?
The persecutor is about blame and control. Think. It's all your fault.
Gotcha.
They're critical, controlling, sometimes punishing. Often it comes from, a need to feel superior or maybe mask their own insecurity. And interestingly, a persecutor can flip, maybe become a victim if they feel attacked or cornered.
So it's not like we're stuck in just one box. We can move around these roles.
Absolutely. That's super important. Someone might usually lean towards victim, but if they get frustrated enough,
They lash out.
yeah, they might suddenly become the persecutor. Or, like you hinted, a rescuer gets resentful because their help isn't, working or appreciated.
And boom, they start blaming the victim.
Exactly. You're not even trying. Suddenly, they're the persecutor.
Wow, it really is like a dysfunctional dance. And you mentioned we can enlist people into it. How does that work? Is it conscious?
Usually not, no. It's often pretty subtle, unconscious. Someone feeling wronged, playing the victim, might just act in ways that naturally pull someone else into the rescuer role.
Like exaggerating how helpless they are?
Yeah, or constantly seeking sympathy. And likewise, someone acting like a strong persecutor might provoke a victim response in another person. Or they might even draw in a rescuer who feels they need to defend the target.
Okay, so we get tangled up in these roles.
Yeah.
And you mentioned hidden payoffs. What keeps us doing it? This seems key to why it's so hard to stop.
Totally key. For the victim, the payoff might be getting attention, or maybe just relief from having to take responsibility. Someone else handles it.
Makes sense.
For the rescuer, it's often about feeling needed, feeling important. It gives them a temporary self-worth boost, even if it's not, healthy.
Right. And the persecutor.
They get that feeling of superiority, of control. It can be a way to push away their own feelings of vulnerability or fear. So yeah, the roles are damaging, but they offer this kind of twisted payoff for underlying needs.
A really warped kind of equilibrium, isn't it? But like that analyst said, stepping into the triangle is maladaptive. The healthy answer is just none of the above.
Exactly.
That really lands. The goal isn't to be the best victim or rescuer, it's to get out completely.
Precisely. And staying in it just keeps us from dealing with the real issues because everyone's busy playing their part in the drama.
So why do we get sucked in? What are the deeper roots here?
There are several layers, really. A big one is often echoes of patterns from early life, our first relationships, our attachment styles.
Attachment theory comes in here.
It does. Some research links insecure attachment, for instance, with being more prone to victim or rescuer behaviors later on.
That clicks. Those early experiences really wire us, huh?
It really can. And in transactional analysis, which is where Karpman's triangle comes from, these roles are often seen as coming from childhood scripts, like the unspoken rules and dynamics we learned in our families growing up.
Okay. And you mentioned in internal family systems, IFS. How does that view these roles?
IFS gives a really compassionate perspective. It sees each role, victim, rescuer, persecutor, as potentially being an inner protector part.
A protector, even the persecutor.
Yeah. These parts have good intentions. Deep down, they're trying to keep us safe. But their methods are maybe, extreme or distorted. The part playing victim might be trying to protect a vulnerable inner part, that inner child, from more hurt by basically saying, I can't do anything, it's hopeless, so maybe no one expects anything.
Wow, okay.
So the first step in IFS is getting curious about that hidden positive intent. What's this part actually trying to protect me from?
That's a huge reframe, not seeing them as flaws, but as maybe misguided protectors. Okay, let's shift gears slightly to this fate motive. What exactly is that?
Fate motive, yeah. It's basically this deep down belief that our lives, or at least parts of them, are already mapped out by forces we can't control.
Like destiny, but maybe more negative.
Often, yeah. It's that feeling that certain patterns, maybe failure or suffering, are just inevitable for us. Like we're destined for a specific, often tough path. It's basically psychological fatalism.
So it's more than just acknowledging, bad stuff happens sometimes.
Oh, yeah, much deeper. One definition I saw called fatalism, a belief that events are predetermined and inevitable, and that individuals have no free will to change the course of these events.
Wow, that's heavy.
It really is, and it leads to that passive, resigned attitude. It's just fate, or why even bother trying? It's a really strong external locus of control.
Meaning you feel like outside forces run your life, not your own choices. Okay, the link to victim thinking seems pretty obvious there.
Super direct. If you truly believe life is rigged against me, it's a tiny step to feeling like a victim and thinking, so there's nothing I can do about it. The fate motive gives the victim role its foundational belief system.
But you said it can show up in rescuers and persecutors too. How does that work? That's less intuitive.
It can. A rescuer might operate from a kind of fatalism about the other person, like, well, they're fundamentally unable to help themselves, that's just how they are, so I have to step in. It sees the other person as inherently stuck.
Okay. And the persecutor?
Maybe a cynical fatalism, like people are just lazy, or they'll always mess up unless someone cracks the whip. There's an underlying belief that others are inherently flawed and won't change on their own. So in all the roles, the fate motive undermines belief in positive change, in agency.
So it fuels the whole triangle by making change seem impossible, a kind of negative self-fulfilling prophecy.
You got it. And clinically, it's worth noting the link between fatalism and things like learned helplessness or depression. Feeling powerless repeatedly can actually, train the brain to expect more powerlessness.
Yeah, it paints a really clear, if grim, picture of how these beliefs trap us in the drama triangle. We just keep replaying the roles because changing seems impossible, maybe even pointless.
Exactly. It's a vicious cycle. The belief in a bad outcome leads to behaviors in the triangle that kind of help create that very outcome.
Okay, so we've got a good handle on what these dynamics are, how they work. Let's pivot to solutions.
Yeah.
From a psychological angle, how do we see the drama triangle and fate motive show up as patterns we can actually work on?
Psychologically, we see them as these really ingrained thought-emotion loops, and also as these repetitive relational games people play. Think about the inner talk. The victims, poor me, feeling helpless. The persecutors, they're always out to get me, feeling maybe anxious or angry.
Right.
And often what's driving it underneath is an attempt by each person in the triangle to avoid some difficult feeling, like, pain, anxiety, maybe shame.
You mentioned some of those underlying beliefs earlier, the drivers for each role. Can you expand on that a bit?
Sure. So the inner part playing victim might believe, if I look helpless, someone will rescue me, and I avoid the pain of trying and failing. The rescuer part might think, if I'm always busy saving others, I feel needed. And that keeps my own feelings of loneliness or inadequacy at bay. And the persecutor part. Blaming others might be a way to push their own insecurity or anger outwards. It gives a sense of control, finding fault elsewhere. The key insight is these roles are often defenses against uncomfortable inner stuff.
And that links right back to that IFS idea of protectors and the vulnerable inner child. Yeah.
Absolutely. Natasha Wilson, an IFS therapist, put it really well. She called these drama roles protectors within us, albeit misguided ones. Underneath that victim, rescuer, or persecutor behavior, there's often that little one, that hurt inner part feeling scared or powerless.
So healing isn't about getting rid of the protector.
No, not according to IFS. It's about understanding and befriending that vulnerable part it's trying to protect. So instead of that automatic, poor me, you pause and ask, okay, what am I really feeling right now? Am I sad, hurt, scared?
So self-awareness is step one. What are some specific psychological tools or methods to build that awareness and start stepping out?
Awareness and insight, definitely the foundation. Like one coach said, building conscious awareness is the very first step if we genuinely want to get out of these sabotaging roles.
How do you build it, though?
Things like journaling about your interactions, your feelings afterwards. Or therapy, obviously, is huge for uncovering patterns. Like someone might notice, whenever I get criticized at work, first I feel like a total victim.
Yeah.
Then I go home and snap at my partner playing persecutor. And then I just feel awful and withdraw back into victim mode. Just naming that cycle, oh, I did the victim-persecutor-victim thing again, starts to break its hold.
Okay, so awareness first. Then what? What are the next psychological moves?
Cognitive reframing is a big one from cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. That means actively challenging those negative, fatalistic thoughts.
Like arguing with yourself.
Kind of, yeah. A therapist might help you look at the actual evidence for a thought, like, I'm doomed to fail. Finding counterexamples, past successes, even small ones. Or setting tiny, achievable goals to build up that feeling of, hey, I can do things. Gradually, that nothing I do matters, belief can shift towards, okay, I have some control here.
You also mentioned the U-turn from IFS. How did that work practically?
The U-turn is really about compassion. Instead of blaming outwards or collapsing inwards, you consciously turn your attention towards your own inner victim part or persecutor part with curiosity.
How does that look?
So when you feel that wave of helplessness, instead of poor me, you pause and ask inside, okay, which part of me feels so hurt or scared right now? What does this part that feels like a victim actually need from me? It acknowledges the feeling without getting stuck in the role.
That sounds kinder.
It is.
Yeah.
Like Natasha Wilson said, when we connect with our core self, we see these parts as protectors trying their best. Then the self can step in, set boundaries, heal the underlying wounds.
Turning inward with understanding, not outward with drama. Makes sense. What other psychological tools help?
Mindfulness and stress reduction are huge. So much of the fuel for the drama triangle is anxiety, unresolved tension.
Totally.
Mindfulness practices meditation, mindful breathing, help us notice those anxious feelings without immediately reacting. Remember that writer who said drama keeps us absorbed but leaves no room for peace?
Yeah.
So if someone, let's call her Sarah, notices she's starting to feel that angry persecutor energy rise up, mindfulness helps her pause, maybe notice the tightness in her chest, her jaw clenching.
Creates a gap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A space between stimulus and response. Allows for a more conscious choice instead of just lashing out automatically.
And lastly, communication skills seem vital to breaking these relational patterns.
Oh, absolutely. Bad communication often defaults straight into rescue or persecution mode. Learning to be assertive, stating your needs and boundaries clearly, directly, without blame is crucial.
Any specific approaches?
Nonviolent communication, NVC, is a great framework. It helps you express feelings and needs honestly, but in a way that's less likely to make others defensive. So instead of, you always mess this up, persecutor, maybe it's, I'm feeling overwhelmed about the deadline and I need more support to make sure we hit it.
Big difference. Much less attacking.
Huge difference. It pulls you out of the roles and into real connection.
You mentioned Emily's story earlier as an example. Can you recap how these tools helped her shift?
Right, Emily. Grew up in a chaotic home, learned to cope by either withdrawing, playing victim, or lashing out as persecutor.
Okay.
In therapy, she connected with that vulnerable inner child part feeling flawed. By practicing pausing when she felt triggered, identifying the hurt underneath instead of just reacting, and learning to ask for what she needed vulnerably, she gradually started communicating from a more authentic place, less drama, more real connection. She stepped out of the cycle.
That's a really powerful example of how these psychological tools can make a real difference. Okay, let's shift again. Let's look through a spiritual lens. How are the drama triangle and fate motive typically seen from that perspective?
Spiritually, the drama triangle is often framed as egoic suffering, attachment to these roles.
Ego getting in the way.
Yeah, many traditions suggest that identifying too strongly with these fixed reactive roles just fuels our inner turmoil. It keeps us from a deeper peace. Think about the Buddhist idea of dukkha suffering or dissatisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
Clinging to a belief like my fate is sealed or rigidly identifying as I am a victim that's seen as solidifying suffering, making it worse.
So the spiritual view warns against getting too attached to these identities.
Definitely. And while many traditions acknowledge forces beyond our control, there's usually a strong caution against using fate or destiny as an excuse for inaction, for staying stuck. That becomes a trap, hindering growth.
Oh, you also mentioned the fate motive can sneak into our prayers or inner talk.
Yeah, it might show up as that recurring negative self-talk, like always asking, why does this always happen to me? Or internalizing, it was just meant to be this way after something bad happens.
Like a negative mantra?
Exactly. While some cultures have a kind of positive acceptance of fate, psychologically it can easily slip into resignation, that feeling of being totally powerless to change anything.
And you made that key distinction earlier between acceptance and resignation.
Mm-hmm.
Can you unpack that a bit more from the spiritual angle?
Yes, crucial difference. Acceptance spiritually is about acknowledging reality as it is right now, including pain or difficulty without fighting it or judging it.
Yeah.
Resignation is giving up hope, feeling powerless about the future. Think stoicism. Focus on what's in your control, your thoughts, actions, intentions, and accept what's not with grace. Janice Ulski said the drama triangle is about being in everyone else's business.
Right.
Stepping out means staying in your own zone of integrity, taking responsibility for your own inner state and actions, no matter what's happening outside.
That theme of personal responsibility keeps coming up, doesn't it, across all these views. So what are some specific spiritual tools or methods to help step out of the triangle and challenge those fate beliefs?
Mindfulness and presence are foundational here too. Practices like meditation, contemplative prayer, maybe yoga, they help you cultivate that observer stance.
Watching the thoughts.
Yeah, watching the thoughts and feelings arise without getting swept away. You notice the poor me stories starting up in your head, but you don't automatically believe it. You maybe focus on your breath instead. Over time, the roles lose their grip as you see them just as mental patterns, not who you are.
Recognizing you're the awareness watching the drama, not just a character stuck in it.
Exactly. And then there's acceptance, sometimes called radical acceptance, fully acknowledging what is pain, failure, loss, without the self-pity or resistance.
Doesn't that mean giving up?
No, not at all. It doesn't mean you stop trying to improve things, but it frees up all the energy you're using to fight reality. So after a job loss, instead of just, why me? You practice accepting the situation, feeling the fear or sadness.
Okay.
And from that place of acceptance, you can plan your next steps more calmly, more clearly.
And non-attachment seems really relevant here too, given how attached we get to the roles and outcomes in the triangle.
Hugely relevant. The rescuer needs to be needed. The victim clings to their story of injustice. The persecutor has to be right. Cultivating non-attachment means loosening the ego's grip on these roles and desired outcomes.
How do you practice that?
Prayer, meditation, maybe using a mantra, these can help release that obsessive focus on results, like the example of the parent always rescuing their adult child.
Yeah.
Through spiritual reflection, maybe guidance, they might learn to trust the child's path, loosen their grip, allow space for growth for both of them.
And compassion, loving kindness. How does that break the cycle? The triangle feels so full of judgment.
It really does. Practices like metta, loving-kindness meditation, involve intentionally sending goodwill to yourself and even to those you see as persecutors.
Even them.
Yeah. Directing compassion to your own inner victim helps heal that part. And trying to understand the pain behind a persecutor's actions can lessen the emotional charge, dissolve some resentment.
And finally, rewriting our life stories through a spiritual lens.
Exactly. Instead of seeing challenges as just bad luck or proof of a negative fate, reframing them, seeing them as maybe opportunities for soul growth, lessons. Viktor Frankl's idea of finding meaning even in immense suffering speaks to this.
Using affirmations too.
Yeah, affirmations that combine spiritual faith with personal responsibility. I trust the process and I take responsible action. Something like that.
The story of Carlos, believing he was cursed, really shows how these spiritual tools can shift things dramatically.
It does. Through meditation, loving-kindness practice, reflection, he started seeing his rescuer-persecutor habits came from his own guilt and shame. Shifting focus to gratitude, his spiritual path. He moved away from fatalism and started choosing a different way to live. Really powerful.
Truly inspiring how these principles can help break seemingly fixed patterns. Okay, let's switch to the coaching perspective now. How do coaches typically see the drama triangle and fate motive when working with clients?
Coaches usually see them as major limiting mindsets, things that actively block clients from reaching goals, from living more empowered lives.
So they hear a lot of victim stories.
Oh, yeah. Victim stories about circumstances, rescuing behaviors at work or home, blaming others for lack of progress. It comes up a lot.
And the focus in coaching is really on empowerment, on agency.
Very much so. Coaches look for what they sometimes call an external mindset, where someone attributes everything, good or bad, to outside factors. Luck, other people, the situation, instead of owning their own choices and power to influence things.
So what are the key coaching tools, the methods they use to help clients shift out of that and into something more empowered?
A really powerful one is David Emerald's empowerment dynamic. It's designed as a direct, positive alternative to the drama triangle. It flips victim-rescuer-persecutor into creator-challenger coach. These are called above-the-line roles.
Okay, creator, challenger, coach.
Yeah.
What do those look like in practice?
So the victim shifts to creator, focusing on desired outcomes, goals, solutions, asking, okay, what can I create or do here?
Proactive.
Exactly. The persecutor shifts to challenger, giving honest feedback, holding people accountable, but for growth, not just to blame.
Constructive.
Right. And the rescuer shifts to coach, asking empowering questions, supporting others to find their own solutions, building their capability, not just jumping in to fix it.
That sounds like a much healthier, more collaborative way to interact.
It really is. Coaches help clients reframe problems as projects they can create solutions for. Conflicts become challenges to learn from. So instead of my manager's criticism makes me a victim,
Yeah.
the coach might help shift to a creator mindset. Okay, what can I learn from this feedback, even if I didn't like the delivery? How can I use it to improve?
Goal setting must be huge in coaching, too, for fighting that fatalism.
Absolutely critical. Models like grow goal, reality, options, will, or setting SMART goals, they force you out of being passive.
How so?
You have to actually articulate what you want, map out the steps. That process itself builds ownership, control. For someone saying, nothing I do matters, a coach might help set one small, achievable goal. Then look at the reality, brainstorm options. It breaks down that feeling of overwhelm into manageable actions.
And focusing on strengths, resources that positive psychology approach that must counter the victim feeling, too.
Definitely. Helping clients see their past successes, times they did overcome challenges, it reconnects them with their agency, their competence. Research shows overcoming a victim mindset involves recognizing your agency, building resilience.
How might a coach do that specifically?
Yeah. Maybe ask them to list past accomplishments, big or small, or keep an accomplishments log. Tangible proof that they can influence outcomes.
And accountability. That seems key in coaching, to move from just talking to doing.
Totally. Coaches use accountability partners, maybe public commitments. Just the act of doing something, taking action, and being accountable for it directly fights that nothing will change belief. Coaches often stress taking 100% responsibility for your part, thoughts, feelings, actions, shifting focus from blame to your own power.
What about those deep-seated assumptions behind the fate motive? How do coaches tackle those?
Gently challenging them. Using the Socratic method, asking questions to explore the evidence for belief like, I'm just unlucky in relationships. Helping clients see other possibilities.
Or other techniques?
Yeah, things like NLP or cognitive reframing language shifts. Helping someone change, I can't do that, into say, okay, how could I approach that? It opens things up.
The example of Anna, believing she'd never get promoted, really shows how coaching can facilitate that shift from fatalistic to proactive.
Yeah, her coach helped her set a clear goal, that certification, broke it down into steps, navigated obstacles, used empowerment dynamic language, focusing on what Anna could create, learn. Gradually, she started seeing herself as capable, proactive, not just stuck on a predetermined path.
It's fascinating how these coaching tools empower people to really take the wheel. Okay, let's zoom out now. How does this play out in organizations in the workplace?
Oh, the drama triangle and fate beliefs can get baked right into company culture, leadership styles.
Like how?
You might see blame cultures, leaders as persecutors, employees feeling like victims, or maybe hero cultures where certain people are always rescuing, leading to burnout. And those corporate fate motives, like that's just how it is here, or we always struggle with X, those can really kill innovation and drive.
So it's not just individual stuff, it can become systemic.
Exactly. These patterns can seriously hurt morale, productivity, create a toxic environment sometimes. If a whole team thinks our industry is doomed, they become passive, reactive. Makes it much harder for the organization to adapt and succeed.
What can organizations actually do about it? What are the tools on that larger scale?
Training is a good start. Training on the drama triangle itself.
For everyone.
Often leadership in teams, yeah. Making people aware of the roles victim, rescuer, persecutor, how they show up at work, helps people spot it in themselves and their teams. Experiential exercises can make it hit home. And the training usually includes how to shift to that above the line language creator, challenger, coach.
Shifting the whole culture towards empowerment seems vital too.
Absolutely. Leaders are key here, promoting a no-blame culture, reframing problems as collective challenges, not chances to point fingers.
Like blameless postmortems.
Exactly. Focus on learning, system improvement, not who messed up. Using creator language, our goal is how can we solve this instead of dwelling on problems or blame, and scaling up that empowerment dynamic idea to whole teams.
And leadership modeling must be huge. People watch the bosses.
Crucial. Managers who don't jump in to rescue, but empower their team to find solutions. That sends message. When an employee says, I can't do this, the leader asks, what support do you need to figure it out, rather than taking over?
Yeah.
And executives admitting their own mistakes, framing them as learning, that directly fights any fate beliefs or perfectionism pressure in the culture.
Can organizations institutionalize healthier patterns? Through policies or norms?
Yes. Things like team communication charters, we speak from responsibility, not blame, HR training in NVC or psychological safety, regular reflection rituals like Scrum retrospectives where teams can actually talk about their dynamics, notice drama patterns, and agree to shift towards problem solving.
And for deeper conflicts, professional help.
Definitely. Offering executive coaching, employee assistance programs, EAPs. Coaches or counselors can use role play, feedback, help introduce boundary setting, gentle accountability within teams or for individuals struggling with these patterns.
That InnovateX example of the persecutor lead, victim developers, rescuer engineer, really shows how an organization can spot this and turn it around.
Yeah, they saw the pattern, brought in training, helped the lead understand their impact, reset roles, shifted the language towards solutions, and ended up with a much more collaborative, productive culture. It can be done.
Wow, we have covered so much ground today. Through all these lenses, psychological, spiritual, coaching, organizational, that summary table you put together is really helpful too. If you had to boil it all down, what's the biggest takeaway?
The core message, really, across all of it is about personal responsibility and making a conscious choice to stop the drama cycle.
Interrupting it.
Exactly. Whether it's building self-awareness psychologically, practicing non-attachment spiritually, focusing on agency and goals in coaching, or building an empowering culture organizationally. The key shift is recognizing your part in the pattern, challenging those limiting fate beliefs, and deliberately choosing healthier ways to interact and take control of your life.
It's a powerful reminder. Even if these patterns feel automatic, deeply ingrained, we're not powerless. There are so many pathways, so many tools to break free.
Absolutely. And as we've seen, each perspective offers unique but often complementary ways to step out of the drama triangle, overcome those limiting fate beliefs, and find more agency, compassion, and clarity inside and out.
Thank you so much. This has been incredibly insightful, a really comprehensive deep dive. Definitely given me, and I'm sure everyone listening, a lot to think about.
My pleasure.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you to consider. Think about just one interaction you had recently where maybe, just maybe, you slipped into victim, rescuer, or persecutor mode. Ask yourself, what might have happened if you'd consciously chosen differently? Maybe focused on being a creator, a challenger, or a coach instead. Or maybe think about one belief you hold, where you feel things are just predetermined, out of your hands. What one small step could you take this week, just one, to challenge that assumption and maybe reclaim a little bit more of your own power? Really powerful things to reflect on. We hope this deep dive gave you some valuable tools and perspectives for your own journey.